Today, we're going to be talking about stay protected and maximize revenue during your highest earning season. Spring break and Easter, one of the biggest revenue opportunities for the year for short-term rental operators, but also a high-risk period for property damage, compliance issues, conflicts, problems with guests. It's a party season for some people. And so today we've got Guesty and Minut, as well as Enso Connect, where we're going to be talking about some practical playbooks on preparing your properties for those peak seasons, protecting those assets for your homeowners, and some of the best practices that are out there. We're also going to talk about how you can effectively generate more revenue on some of your properties from the sort of stay protected component, talking about damage waivers, safety deposits, as well as the devices in-house that can protect the assets, insurance products, and the overall verification process for guests. This is a very interesting season where we typically see more claims than in other seasons when it comes to some of the insurance products that are out there. So if you're in the US and you're hearing this, you've just had your properties rented by a few guests, and maybe you've had some of these issues. We're going to go through a few of those steps that you can take. My name is Francois. I am the co-founder and CEO of Enso Connect. I'm joined today by Michael and Nils, who will do a brief introduction about both Minut and Guesty. First things first, we're going to talk about the peak season reality of the risk and the revenue profiles. 2, we're going to talk about protecting those properties during the high occupancy. 3, strategies to capture revenue with protecting tools. 4, compliance requirements that apply today for your vacation rentals. Costly mistakes to avoid, what ends up going wrong and how to fix it. And then to sustain that protection and revenue, strategies that go beyond just peak seasons, but also just in general for your vacation rentals throughout the year. My name is Francois. I'm one of the co-founders, the CEO of Enso. A bit about Enso. We are a guest experience platform for the vacation rental industry, serving over 60,000 properties, generated over $30 million for our customers to date, quite a few integrations, and really our focus is on digitizing and monetizing the guest experience. If it's your first time learning about Enso, we're effectively an AI guest engagement platform that allows you to message your guests automatically, generate upsells through a guest portal, verify your guests, and provide guides and so on. Without further ado, a bit about Guesty.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Collins. I am a business program manager here at Guesty. So Guesty is the all-in-one platform for short-term rental property management companies. Work with everyone from a one listing property management company all the way up to enterprise users with several thousand listings. We manage 500,000 active listings on our platform, constantly upgrading the platform. It gives you a lot of different tools, centralizing operations, automating day-to-day tasks, and then just also syncing across all OTAs and booking channels. Happy to talk about Guesty and the Guesty Shield that we're going to be covering today.
And Nils, you mind sharing a bit about Minut?
Thank you so much for having me here, Francois. Yeah. For those of you who are new to Minut, we do a lot of different things, but the focus really is around disturbance monitoring and making sure that your properties have respectful guests who are taking care of the neighbors and taking care of the property. So we sell sensors that work for noise and occupancy monitoring, cigarette smoke detection, can work as a home alarm between bookings. And we are now also starting to work with guest safety, which is a new area for us, where we work with fire and gas alarms to make sure they are remotely auditable and making sure that if guests potentially tamper with these, you get real-time alerts so that you can fix them before the next guest shows up. And we're, of course, integrated with Enso Connect and Guesty, so you can have all of the messages around noise monitoring, for example, working well with the Enso guest experience platform or the Guesty, whichever it is that you use. We work with about 50,000 managers, and I think we've sold over 100,000 sensors, which you can probably find all over the world.
Yeah, I've stayed in a few properties, and it's one of those things that I look at. I'm like, oh, what is this device? Oh, it's a Minut device. For sure, you'll see them all over the world. So let's talk about the reality of high season and vacation rentals, the risk of property damage versus the opportunity of incremental revenue. I'll start with you, Nils. What can we learn about damage in vacation rentals from your experience and some of the data that you've seen?
The biggest thing around peak season, especially spring break, is of course you see a lot more parties than you do during the rest of the season. And unfortunately, most people who experience a party, that is when they go and search online and then they find Minut. And we would love to turn that around, because a single party incident can cost thousands of dollars in both damage and then the consequences for the next guest and extra cleaning, etc. And it's much, much better to work with preventing that rather than taking on the insurance cost after the fact. And we also work with some insurance providers where you can typically get a bit of a discount on your insurance premium by installing Minut, because we've seen that decreases the claims related to property damage from parties with over 40%.
That makes sense. 1 in 10 guests cause accidental damage in short-term rentals. We've seen this in our data as well, where effectively there's some sort of issue with that property, and 43% of hosts have experienced an unwanted party in their property. Funny enough, I had a property manager in Texas share a video of the Project X that happened in one of their listings. And since then, they've had to enforce certain rules to make sure that that doesn't happen again. That video is still publicly available online. It does look like an insane party, but it is someone else's property. Being respectful of what's out there and protecting the asset is key. The average cost of some of these damages, we'll see anywhere, cost for fines for noise disturbances. Do you mind sharing a bit more about some of that data, Nils, on property damage per incident and so on?
This depends a little bit on where you are located, but in a lot of places, in particularly the US now, there is fines related to if you disturb the neighborhood. And unfortunately, these are often he said, she said types of situations. So if you have a neighborhood where maybe the neighbors are not so welcoming, there's also an issue with false noise disturbances. And of course, having the data can help you fight those. But what we see is really that an ounce of prevention here means that you don't actually have to get this damage. Because most of the time, of course, like there are people who really go in for a large party and intend to damage the property. That's not really the case with most of them. They're just people who are relatively good guests, but might be going overboard or might be losing a bit control over it. And what we've seen is that the faster the intervention, the more likely you are to stop that party from escalating. That is why it's so important with proper monitoring, because by the time you get a message from a neighbor or you get to know about it, it's typically too late. Whereas if you have a noise monitor, then within a few minutes of it becoming too loud or with a crowd forming, you can have it automated so that it texts your guests immediately. And for the 80+% of cases where people are actually good people, that little nudge, that message just in time means they realize that, oh, this is not the place we should throw the party, we should go out on the town. And so that is really like where the big value is. And that's why I think these types of integrations that we do with Guesty and Enso are really coming into their own, because that is how you can prevent this damage from happening in the first place.
So very costly damages can happen, and figuring out how to price that effectively can be a bit difficult. And I assume for most property managers with margins that are fairly tight, these are the kinds of issues that completely destroy those margins when you end up having that booking. So speaking of, you didn't necessarily protect your asset the right way, or you had one of these incidences. Now this is where Guesty kicks in. You guys have a product called Guesty Shield. Michael, do you mind sharing a bit more about how that works, what that looks like, and what the opportunity is effectively for operators?
Yeah, absolutely. Guesty Shield is a damage protection program for short-term rental property management companies. Allows you to file claims regardless of the OTA without any guest intervention. We've run it for the last 5 years, and this is the data that we have here. So we've covered 772,000 reservations in that time period. And we've seen the majority, like 40% of claims occur in July, August, January, and March. So spring break season, and then obviously peak summer season in the US here. That's 7% above average. And then last thing is really the opportunity cost, right? And this is what Nils was saying, what you were saying, Francois. The average nightly rate throughout the US is $150. In July, during that peak season, it's double in the US. It's $300. And it doesn't take much, right, for one listing to go offline for a couple nights if you do have one of these risky reservations that turn into a party or smoke damages, etc. And so really just being mindful of that and having the protection in place, whether it's with Minut, Enso, or Guesty Shield, is what we've seen has been successful.
That makes sense. So we've got a prevention component, which is to measure the data via the devices to be able to detect any ongoing issues. We have a protection component with regards to if there is in fact an issue, what can you do to protect on the revenue side? And then what I'll do is I'll take a step back on the initial side, which is to prevent the guests from even arriving in the first place, or to create sort of some barriers to entry to ensure that the guest staying is in fact the correct guest. And I like to spin this in a sort of revenue angle. If you guys hear my webinars and some of the sessions that I do, I always talk about upsells. So I always bring up the fact that you can be making money on every single one of your reservations. And one of the particular ones that's relevant to protecting your asset is with regards to damage waivers. Before we dive into damage waivers and safety deposits, if you had a protection component around verification, house rules, getting things digitally signed by guests, penalties for violations. So having that built into some of your agreements to understand that you can in fact collect a safety deposit if they do end up smoking in the property or if there's damages collected. ID verification is another one that's very important to prevent bad actors and fraudulent guests from even getting into the property in the first place. There's a lot of metadata information about guests that can be collected via those IDs, be it if they're underage, be it if the IP address of that guest doesn't match or it's a local guest. Last minute reservations from someone who's young, who's staying in your property and lives in the area nearby, guarantee you it's going to be some sort of event and guarantee you it could be a party or some sort of issue for your property. So having that information allows you to make the first decision of whether or not this is a risk you're willing to take. The second layer of protection is going to be on that sort of Minut device, which is being able to track throughout the state if there are any events. And the third layer of verification or protection is actually ensuring and protecting the asset in case those bad actors go through those doors. And this isn't just something that's a nice to have. This is also a really unique selling point when you have all three pieces built in for your homeowners. Because other than having 5 stars and making sure that you're generating revenue, the last thing owners want is to know that their property is not in good hands and there's risks with damages, wear and tear, or even worse, accidents happening with both guests or the property itself. Now, to mitigate some of this, the in-stay monitoring part, you've touched on a few components of what the device does, Nils, but do you mind walking us through? Because it started off as noise only, I think, when I first met you a few years ago, and now you guys have covered so many different types of sensoring in those devices. Do you mind sharing a bit more the uniqueness of Minut here?
Right, because noise alone might not be an issue, right? You get someone turning on the TV and being elderly can't hear. But when you have a combination of really high occupancy or door openings that are like way too frequent, you can start to get like a better picture of what's actually going on. So that's why we started going from noise into occupancy monitoring, motion detection, and then now like the cigarette smoke detection. We also utilize all of this data to improve the guest experience and make sure that, for example, indoor climate and air quality is within the bounds that you set. There are then automations that you can tag on where you can, for example, turn off the AC or turn on the heating if you're in a seasonal property, depending on whether guests are present or not. And then, of course, like as we've become a bigger company, the product is more well known. So tamper detection becomes really important. And the moment someone touches the device, you get notified, the guest gets notified, and we've seen that that's been really helpful in mitigating issues with that. Then a little bit depending on where you are, in some places, if you run a rental in a city and there might be a neighbor next door, that is a very sensitive area. But there are also places where indoors might be fine, but if you have a hot tub outdoors or something, like noise there can actually be quite disruptive as well. So the same sensor can be used indoor or outdoors depending on the specific property that you have. So it is really this like real-time data layer about what's happening in your portfolio, and then there are different automations that you can trigger based on what's going on.
That makes sense. Just to clarify, is it the same device for indoor or outdoor, or is it different devices?
That's the same device, yeah. And this one that you have here is our latest product, which actually hasn't come out yet. We're still a few weeks here away. So you're getting a secret sneak peek. But the problem that we wanted to fix was that we got feedback from a lot of our customers that guests would sometimes tamper with smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. And they would do this either because they wanted to smoke, because maybe they burnt the toast and it triggered the smoke alarm, and then they got irritated and they tore it down. But most smoke alarms, they don't have any sort of tamper detection, and they don't have any sort of smart to tell you that they've been out of commission. And that might not be such an issue in your own home. Like in your own home, if you take it down after having a toast incident, you're going to put it back up again because you want to make sure you're safe in your home. In a rental environment, it's very easy to forget about this and to forget to check between each guest. So we're developing a new device that is a combined smoke and carbon monoxide alarm or fire alarm and carbon monoxide alarm that you can remotely audit, remotely test. And you can schedule this to happen between each guest so that for certain that you have a working fire and gas alarm in your rental. This is important not just to keep your guests safe, but also as a property manager in most of the US, you are liable in case the fire alarms don't work. And unfortunately, the research that we've done tells us that something like 50% of rentals don't actually have a working fire alarm. So this is something that we feel very strongly about improving. And this new device will be called the Minut A1, starting a new product line. And it should be available in America in the next month or so.
That's amazing. And yeah, you mentioned it, the liability aspect. It's not just about protecting the asset. It's about protecting the guest, protecting the homeowner, and in a very litigious country like the US, protecting everyone effectively from any sort of wrongful doing. Before I dive into safety deposits and damage waivers, I'd love to touch back on Guesty Shield, Michael. Do you mind sharing a bit more what the mechanisms of Guesty Shield look like? So is it something that's embedded on every reservation? Do you get to choose for specific reservations? What does the payout look like, and what does it really cover?
Yeah, so it covers any type of guest damages. There's no guest involvement. That's the difference between our internal Guesty Shield product versus what you get coverage with on the OTA. First thing Airbnb is going to do, for example, in air cover is ask the guest, hey, did you put this hole in the wall? And if you did, please pay us $500. And that often creates a lot of friction, right? So that's really the main difference there. It would cover all your reservations. So you'd be good across all platforms. And then you're just able to file claims internally within Guesty right from the Guesty calendar. It makes it really easy. Average time to be approved on a claim is 3 days, and about 95% of our claims are approved. Anything that's not approved is really just smaller things such as wear and tear. I had somebody ask me recently, hey, why isn't this cutting board covered, for example? It's cutting boards, they wear down over time. That's kind of what happens. But if it's something significant, like a real damage, smoke damage, hole in the wall, things like that will be covered for sure.
And who eats the cost of Guesty Shield?
What we see 99% of the time, property management companies are passing this on to the guests or to their owners, or even doing a hybrid approach of both. We've got per reservation pricing. We've also got per night pricing. And you can also mix and match those across your portfolio to make sure that you're pricing your listings competitively in each market.
Makes perfect sense. So now you have a place to protect those assets. Let's talk about some safety deposits versus damage waivers. So I would say the protection component from Guesty is damage protection. Effectively, you're protecting everything from, and does it include liability, Michael?
We have a liability option as well. We are soon going to be launching a bundle that has both options available, but it's not available yet. So.
Okay, soon to come. So one of the items that you can do if you're passing on that cost to the homeowner, or if you're passing it on to the guest, two different ways of doing things. I've seen a lot of operators passing it on to the owners, effectively taking it out of the commission structure, which makes sense because it is an add-on for homeowners to know that their properties are secure, and that's a really easy way to do. One of the items that we offer at Enso to add on to the revenue as well as some of the protection is this concept of a safety deposit or a damage waiver. It's basically giving the guest the choice between either a safety deposit, which can be $200, $500, depends on your nightly rates and what you deem reasonable for your guests. It also depends on markets and so on. And then a damage waiver, which I've seen go all the way up to $100 or all the way as low as $10. And the idea being the guest gets to choose, they choose between the safety deposit, which will be held on their card, not charged until they're at the end of their stay and a few days after to be able to collect if there's any issues, or pay a one-time fee that effectively covers all damages up to that safety deposit. So think of it as more like small claims court, right? You're not going to go after the guest because they scratched the cutting board, but you also know that it's so scratched now that you want to replace it, and you don't want to go back to the homeowner and say, hey, we need a new cutting board. I'm invoicing you for $10. So being able to create this revenue stream effectively gives the guest the choice. 80% of guests end up picking the damage waiver because it just feels easier and it's just quick and you just pay for it and that's it. It's non-refundable. And that revenue only covers up to those safety deposits amount. So if you had a safety deposit of $500, it covers up to $500, but you can choose that level of protection based on what makes sense. So if you combine a Minut device, a verification process, a house rules, a damage waiver, safety deposit, and Guesty Shield, you will have a lot of protection placed up to effectively protect the asset at every stage of the guest journey. When the guest chooses the safety deposit, you're dealing with guest disputes. Oh, this didn't happen, etc. You go all through the back and forth, and there's always an opportunity for this lost opportunity. When you pick the damage waiver, even though guests don't necessarily like fees, you've provided an option. If they don't want that fee, they can choose the safety deposit. So in order to make it more fair to the guests, make sure to have transparent communication that you offer this program. Make sure to have fair pricing, highlight the benefits, not just the costs, and offer it as a choice. Now, in some channels, such as Airbnb, you cannot force a guest through an off-platform mandatory fee. And that is where you have the option for an optional damage waiver. And I'll get to that in a second. So from a guest experience perspective, the security deposit can be a bit frustrating for disputes, for delays, but also for trust. They don't know you. They don't know you as the operator. Are you a professional operator? Are you a side hustler? Are you going to keep all of the money every single time? Whereas the damage waiver is more of a smooth and hassle-free experience. And when you run the math, the financial comparison of a safety deposit versus a damage waiver on that assumption of 1 in 10 guests cause damages, that means realistically you're going to collect $500 for that one guest, assuming you're able to fight and win that safety deposit battle. Whereas on 25 listings, 5 bookings, if you were to have that sort of conversion rate of 80% and so on, you're looking at revenue that you're generating for every single one of those reservations that can be used towards that one guest who caused certain damages. So you can effectively make up to $17,500 for those 25 listings. We have countless examples of this working for property managers all over the world, be it Europe, North America, and so on. And for those of you who are a bit more skeptical or who don't want to offer a safety deposit for your guests because you're still hesitant as to whether or not guests would appreciate that or if it would create frustration for them, we do also have these optional damage waiver, which is effectively telling the guest, choose whether or not you want to add this. We will not come after you for any damages under a certain amount. And usually we recommend about 10 times the cost of the damage waiver based on that math of 1 in 10 guests causing damages. So this is really an arbitrage on risk that we're creating. Think of it like self-insurance, but it isn't insurance. There is no insurance product tied to this. And you can stack up the different types of protection systems you have in place. So you can stack up Guesty Shield. You can stack up the optional damage waivers. You can stack up a Minut device, verification, house agreements, and so on to protect every stage of the guest journey. And last but not least, if you don't believe in the revenue side, we've started a new program called the 6-Figure Club at Enso, which is basically anyone who generates over $100,000 in upsells or fees. We've got almost over 100 customers that are generated more than $100,000 in upsells or other types of revenue streams. And Brian's a good example who's made probably $30,000 to $40,000 last year just on damage waivers protecting the properties or houseboats that he has in Baltimore. So feel free to have a look at some of the case studies that are out there. Guys, Michael, Nils, let's talk about some of the do's and don'ts. So safe and profitable high season playbook. What would be your do's and don'ts? Nils, what are your do's and don'ts for a safe and profitable high season playbook?
The most important thing is to prepare before the high season because, of course, when you're in the middle of it, you are busy. So use the months beforehand to make sure you are set up. Make sure that you have done the maintenance of your property. Make sure that fire and smoke alarms are in good working order. Install any new devices that you are considering. And, of course, like the same for the software. So do all the things to make sure that your properties and your company is really ready for the onslaught of guests that come every summer.
And the verification process probably happens at the beginning of the stay. The insurance will happen after the stay. The devices will happen during the stay. So now's a great time to start getting ready. Michael, how about yourself? What are some of the do's and don'ts for safe and profitable high season?
Absolutely. I've talked to hundreds of property management companies at Guesty now. And the largest ones, they all have a standard operating procedure for damages and risk, whether it's the verification to what do we do with the damage waiver and security deposit to the communication that happens afterwards, submitting and filing claims. They have whole dedicated teams to it. And it really seems like a requirement in order for them to grow. So definitely recommend doing that if you don't have it in place and as you look to scale your business. On the don't side, I would say the complete opposite. Don't just cross your fingers and hope that everything works out. Definitely have a plan, be prepared because things will go wrong. I can speak to that personally. I actually managed 15 short-term rentals myself a few years back. It seemed like everything that could have went wrong with damages. So
I feel like that's with any business that you build. You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst.
yeah.
That's the best way to make that work. I completely agree. My do's and don'ts would be similar to what Nils and Michael have shared, which is think about your guest journey from start to finish. The journey for a guest isn't starting in your high season. It is starting right now as your bookings are starting to flood through. There's a lot of available information and preventative measures you can take for people who will be bad actors. And that includes everything that we've shared about across damage waivers, safety deposits, guest verification, house rules and agreements, collecting information about your guests as well, be it travel reasons, if they're there for a local event, a conference, and so on. That'll help you make some of those decisions. And remember, you've mentioned to homeowners that you would treat these as your own properties. So start protecting them from the very start. Look at some of the Minut devices that are out there, and especially the new ones that will be coming out. Having those devices in place just gives you better monitoring throughout their stay, so you know what is happening and with which guests. And of course, start layering on different types of insurance products, specifically Guesty Shield, which again isn't even a cost factor. It's something that your owners are more than willingly going to be paying for, or your guests, and will ensure that you're not having to fight a guest on a claim afterwards with other types of insurable and non-insurance products like Airbnb's non-guaranteed guarantee is what I call it, so that you can always protect that asset. We're going to open it up for questions. And one of the first ones I see here from Mark is about Canada for the devices. I know, Nils, you answered, but maybe you want to speak towards the launch of the current or the new device as well as the current devices and where they're supported.
Yeah, the initial launch will be in the US. And of course, like Minut is a very global company. We originate in Sweden, which is a small market. So we've always had to work on a sort of global stage. But when it comes to certifications required for taking responsibility for guest safety, those are at a much higher bar than your regular electronics. So it's much more difficult than our existing devices. So that means we'll have to take it a little bit more country by country, because each country has its own laws. So it'll be the US first, but of course we want to bring it as soon as possible to Canada, which has its own set of certifications, as well as Britain and the EU next. And probably Japan as well, but that might be a little while.
We've got another question here from Maxime. With damage waivers, doesn't it cause more damage? Guests think that they can now cause any damage. Obviously, this damage waiver only covers up to a certain amount. So it's not a unlimited, you can trash the house and do whatever you want for $50. I know there's a few car rental companies that have these damage waiver type products where it's basically total the car and you're absolutely fine. This isn't the same since it's a home. It's a revenue arbitrage. So typically what we'll see is that the revenue far outweighs the types of damages that we'll see in given properties. And with the right process of guest verification beforehand, collecting IDs, signing a house rule agreement, we minimize or de-risk certain bad actors from staying in the property in the first place. It's really a revenue arbitrage compared to the risk that we're creating for damages. And again, in the house rules, we do specifically state this is not a product that you purchase and you are waived of any and all damages and liability. This is effectively waiving a certain amount for small wear and tear. The type of products that won't necessarily be covered by insurance products, the types of products that you don't necessarily want to go back to the homeowner and let them know that, oh, we need this replaced and it's a small item and you're just going to pester your owners with smaller components here. We don't see necessarily an increase in damages here for this. A few other questions. We do have some special offers, and I already see that, Nils, I think you've already got a customer signing up right now from this webinar.
Yes,
so that's pretty awesome. Mark. Mark, glad to see that Minut is of interest. It's an awesome device. I think we've been working out for 3-4 years with Minut, and I can only say good things about it. And I'm not being paid for that, by the way. So this is purely on the personal side. Let's briefly share as well. Are there any special offers on the Minut side for the new device, for the current devices? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it looked like Mark found our spring offer, so I posted it in the channel so that everyone can get it. But we're currently running a promotion for people who are looking to get ready for the high season, where we have a 25% off with the code. I should say though that the Minut A1, which is this new fire and gas alarm, that's not available to buy yet. We'll have to wait another few weeks. But the Minut M3 devices that are doing noise and occupancy monitoring, the kind of things that we're known for, those are the ones that are on offer.
Do you have a timeline? Sorry to put you on the spot, Nils, for the new device.
I think we're talking about 4 weeks. I'm super excited. It's been about 2 years in the making, so I can't wait to get it out the door.
That's awesome. This hardware is quite unique for vacation rentals. I think if there's two device types that you guys need for your vacation rentals, it's Minut and a smart lock. That's effectively going to do a lot of good things for your business. Any special offers from Guesty on your front if people are thinking about switching PMSs or adopting a property management software?
That bundle option that I mentioned earlier with the damage waiver and liability, that's going to be rolling out in the next few weeks. And it really is top of the line coverage that I've seen across the short-term rental industry, but obviously only available to Guesty customers. So definitely something to watch out for. And if you have any questions, please reach out.
100%. And we do have one more question, which is how does it work with Airbnb related to the damage waiver component? So as I pointed out, Airbnb has a different set of rules for any off-platform fees. If it's a optional fee, if it's like an upsell or something like that, you can collect payments in certain cases. If it's a mandatory fee, that's where they get a bit more strict. So damage waivers are optional. They get to choose between a safety deposit or a damage waiver, or they get to choose between a damage waiver or none. The first product converts at 80%. The second product converts at 10%. Again, we're presenting it as more of an option to guests. We're not forcing them to pay any sort of fees. And I believe in the context of Guesty, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's baked into the overall rates. So it's completely kosher, if you will, with the Airbnb policies and so on. Is that correct, Michael?
Yeah, you have a lot of options. That's one of them. You can also bill the owners, and we've got a lot of flexibility there. We can get creative.
I think, Nils, you've got a demo request already booked right there. Good to go with Mark. Mark, thank you for joining the webinar. We are going to be introducing a new educational platform for webinars and for content with our partners in the coming weeks. So stay tuned in your emails from Enso. And thank you so much, Nils and Michael, for joining this call. Really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.